Hello, good afternoon, good morning, a good day for all of you, wherever you are. Just to let you know that we are recording this session to be available in the future on the YouTube of the European Society for Environmental History. Thanks for attending this session today. I would like just to give you a quick welcome. I'm Nina Vieira. I am the regional representative for Portugal. And together with Anna Olenenko and Katie Lindstrom, we have been organizing this series of the Environment History Today webinars for almost 2 years now. These seminars are intended to connect the different regions of the society, to put all of us in contact and to foster our knowledge about environmental history topics that we are all studying and developing, and to promote the debate among ourselves within and beyond the society regions. So today's session is organized by Turkey, and we will have a very interesting book presentation. So with no further delay, I will pass the word to Onur Inal, the chair of this session. And thank you, all of you, for attending. Onur.
Thank you. Thank you, Nina. So I'm Onur Inal. I represent Turkey at the European Society for Environmental History since 2017, and that's my last year. So Bulgaria is one of the regions that's not represented at the ESEH, and I thought it's a good idea to kind of promote Bulgaria and Stefan. So and today we will host Stefan Peychev, and he will be talking about his new book, his forthcoming book. Actually, the book was supposed to come out in December, January. So at the time we planned this talk, but there are some technical difficulties, and I think it will be out next month or at the beginning of April. So a few words about Stefan. He's a historian of the Ottoman Empire, its successor states, and the wider world. His extensive research interests span environmental history, urban history, nature and culture, space and place, history and theory of travel, history of science, and global history. He holds PhD in history from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. He has taught courses in the history of the Islamic world and global history at the University of Illinois and Boston College. He's currently an advanced academia fellow at the Center for Advanced Study in Sofia, Bulgaria. And he's working on his new project, on his second book project, entitled Fire and Water, the hydrothermal landscapes of the Balkans in the age of geological travel, circa 1500 to 1900. But today he will talk about his first book, forthcoming book, and on Ottoman Sofia, so water on Ottoman Sofia. So I'll pass the word to Stefan. So welcome, Stefan, and it's our pleasure to host you. And thank you.
Hello, Onur. Hello, everyone. First, I'd like to thank the European Society for Environmental History and the Environmental History Today webinar series for this opportunity to present my book. It's a pleasure to be here, and I also want to thank specifically Onur Inal for reaching out and organizing this presentation. So I'm going to share my screen now. Unfortunately, sharing is not turned on. So I have to be made a host, I guess.
Okay, let's check it.
Can you try now?
You're a host?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
You see my screen now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll talk about my book, The Nature of the Ottoman City, Water and Urban Space in Sofia, 1380s, 1910s. It will be out in about a month, hopefully, with Cambridge University Press. The nature of the Ottoman city explores the intersection of nature and culture in the production and transformation of urban space and place. It places the natural environment and the relationship between humans and water at the center of the study of Sofia's history. At the same time, I use the notion of nature metaphorically to introduce a discussion of the characteristic mechanisms of Ottoman urbanism. So here's the plan for the next 30 minutes. First, I'm gonna introduce very briefly the national narrative of the Ottoman period in Sofia's history. Then I'll talk about my main arguments. I'll give you a quick walkthrough of the book, and at the end of the presentation, I'll elaborate on some of the broader interventions and contributions that this book makes. In 1940, Bulgarian author and politician Urlin Vasiliev praised Sofia's modern water infrastructure by contrasting it with a stereotypical description of the state of public works in the Ottoman period. The Turks, lost in lazy daydreams about the sherbets in the heavenly gardens, did not invest much effort into developing further the water supply achievements of Romans and ancient Bulgarians. Yet, spurred by the distant memory of drought in their lands of origin, they did take care of the few fountains built around coffee houses in the market districts. There were 3 water technicians. They distributed the water as they wished, releasing it into the wood and clay pipes that often got clogged and damaged. This statement encapsulates the national narrative of the Ottoman period in Sofia's history, which defines the Ottoman era as a breach in the city's natural path of development. Bulgarian historiography has presented the Ottomans as unable to conceive of any ideas of urban space, devoid of a concept of natural resource management, and lacking the resolve to carry out large infrastructural projects. Sofia has been considered the archetype of the disastrous Ottoman public works system, a rudimentary system that remained static over the course of 5 centuries. Water, in particular, was the natural element that the Ottomans, due to their nomadic heritage, were never able to control and take full advantage of. Problematizing the narrative of ruin and decay that underpins the dominant discourse on the Ottoman period in Sofia's history, in this book, I argue that the Ottomans harnessed the full potential of Sofia's rich hydrography, including surface and underground waters, into an efficient system of water management that served the city until the eve of World War I, more than 3 decades after the end of Ottoman rule. The 2 cornerstones of this system were the constant supply of running water coming from the nearby mountain and the hot thermal water spring in the center of the city. The book explores the trajectory of Ottoman Sofia's water infrastructure, discussing the construction and maintenance of water facilities and shedding light on the various mechanisms through which a host of local and central actors and institutions secure the longevity of the system. Public works, I argue in this book, were not an afterthought for the Ottomans. Over the course of the entire of the empire's long lifespan, the provisioning of public services experienced breakthroughs and downturns, and Ottoman Sofia's trajectory is illustrative of both. As the nature of the Ottoman city shows, a focus on water facilitates the production of an engaging narrative of Ottoman Sofia's history. It advances our understanding of the relationship between built space and the natural environment and provides a vivid picture of urban life. Water, this book argues, was the foundational element for Sofia. It predetermined the contours of the urban fabric and throughout the Ottoman period was a defining characteristic of the urban experience and one of the mainstays of place identity. The book is set in a longue durée framework, starting with the conquest of Sofia by the Ottomans in the 1380s and ending in the 1910s. So for those of you who know that Ottoman rule in Sofia actually ended in 1878, this decision to include 3.5 decades of the post-Ottoman period in the scope of the book might look a bit counterintuitive, especially given the rapid rate of urban transformation that occurred in post-Ottoman Sofia. However, I argue that while the level of reconfiguration of urban space in Sofia in the decades following the end of Ottoman rule in 1878 was indeed staggering, some of the main directions in the transformation of the urban fabric had already been charted in the Ottoman period. And my research points specifically to a high degree of continuity in the management of the city's water infrastructure, an area that was otherwise at the forefront of the modernization plans of the post-Ottoman authorities. Set in a longue durée framework, the nature of the Ottoman city highlights the Ottoman legacies of the post-Ottoman period in urban planning, water supply, and natural resource management, arguing that a wide chronological lens can help us tear down the narrative of stagnation and decay that has marked decades of thinking and writing about Ottoman Sofia. And what has enabled me to develop this longue durée framework is the use of environmental history as a perspective to the study of Sofia. I find it really striking that Sofia's historiography has so far consistently avoided talking about the role of nature in the making of urban space and place. Neither antiquity, when the thermal baths that were built by the Romans occupied most of the city's center, nor the post-Ottoman period have ever been studied from an environmental perspective. That's why in this book I argue not just for the utility, but for the dire necessity of an environmental perspective to comprehend the cultural underpinnings and historical trajectory of urban life. This book treats nature as a physical agent in the production and transformation of urban space. I show that reading Sofia's history as a history of water can help us understand the logic of urban form and space and reconstruct the everyday life of the urban community during the Ottoman period. But water was far from being the only environmental actor involved in the making of urban space and place in Ottoman Sofia. The book examines the impact of earthquakes. It deals with Sofia's proverbial mud and the challenges that it posed to the modernization campaign that was carried out by the post-Ottoman authorities. It sheds light on an unexpected agent, horse manure, that can help us debunk one of the most persistent civilizational stereotypes about Ottoman Sofia, the stereotype of Sofia as Boklukopolis, or the city of trash. Hence, while this book's lens is focused on water, it doesn't ignore the other elements and their contributions to shaping Sofia's history. In the presentation, I'll focus on water, but we can talk about these other environmental agents in the Q&A session. An environmental perspective on urban history also helps reveal the link between city and countryside, which, as William Cronon showed us in Nature's Metropolis, are two sides of the same coin. So in Ottoman times, Sofia's immediate rural hinterland provided labor for the maintenance of the city's water supply system in exchange for tax relief for the laborers. It shows how when the clay and wood pipes of its water supply needed maintenance, Sofia tapped from a regional economy of natural resource management. The nature of the Ottoman city places Sofia in its widest environmental, social, political, institutional, and economic contexts, tracing how the relationship between nature and culture played out in Sofia and on the Sofia plain from the late 14th until the early 20th century. Essentially, the nature of the Ottoman city is a study of the construction and transformation of space and place. As such, it takes some of its cues from cultural geography and cultural anthropology. Yifu Tuan has argued that in an urban setting, the sense of place is based on a number of factors, including architectural distinction, rich cultural memory, public rights, and notable events. Through these features, the unmistakable character of the city is concretized in the eyes of its inhabitants. In Ottoman Sofia, the thermal spring and the public baths were the most distinguishable environmental, architectural, and cultural characteristics around which the urban folk elaborated its place consciousness. For Tuan, place is an organized world of meaning, and as such, it is essentially a static concept. He argues that if we see the world as a process, that is, admit that it's constantly changing, we should not be able to develop any sense of place. In contrast to this, however, in this book, I argue that we should not isolate a single moment and privilege it as truer than other moments. Only through comparisons across historical eras can we understand and appreciate the Ottoman contribution to urban development and the right place of the Ottoman period in the history of Sofia and in the formation and evolution of built fabric, urban culture, and local character. And that's why this book is set in a longue durée framework, studying urban space and place in the process of their production and transformation over the course of 5.5 centuries, and highlighting the continuities and commonalities between the Ottoman and post-Ottoman approaches to the management of Sofia's natural resources and water facilities. And now, having presented the main arguments and the broader conceptual framework of the book, I'll zoom in on some of the main themes of the book, and I'll illustrate my arguments with some concrete examples. The beginnings of Sofia's history date back to the Neolithic. Sofia was an important political and administrative center in the Roman and Byzantine empires and in medieval Bulgaria. It was conquered by the Ottomans in the 1380s, and from the mid-15th until the early 19th century, it occupied the position of capital of Rumeli, the highest-ranking province of the early modern Ottoman Empire. Sofia's preeminence in the Ottoman administrative structure left a significant imprint on its urban landscape. The city boasted some of the most representative works of Ottoman architecture in the Balkans. By the turn of the 19th century, however, things had started to change dramatically. The Ottoman Empire's European territories were shrinking. Sofia lost its position as provincial capital, and by the mid-19th century, it was just an insignificant peripheral town. In 1879, it became the capital city of the Bulgarian Principality. In terms of its geographical location and environmental setting, Sofia is located in a mountainous region in the geographical center of the Balkan Peninsula. The total area of the Sofia plain is roughly 1,050 square kilometers, with an altitude varying between 550 and 650 meters above sea level. It has a humid continental climate with 4 seasons and a mean yearly temperature of around 10 degrees Celsius, a variety of fertile soil types, rich vegetation. The plain is almost entirely enclosed by a ring of mountains, providing a steady supply of wood and mineral resources. The city is located in the southeastern section of the plain, at the foot of the Vitosha mountain. In terms of its hydrographic characteristics, the Sofia plain has abundant amounts of water from the Iskar River and its numerous tributaries, and a rich store of underground waters. The region's distinctive hydrographic feature actually is the abundance of thermal waters. The entire plain, together with the mountain sides surrounding it, represents a hydrothermal basin that contains a significant store of all types of underground waters. And indeed, Sofia's urban nucleus developed around a thermal spring. The central thread in much of the book's narrative is the functioning of the system of pious foundations, which played the most decisive role in the expansion and transformation of the built fabric and the provisioning of public services. So for those in the audience who don't know, an Ottoman pious foundation in its narrowest definition is property dedicated to a religious or charitable purpose. And to illustrate this briefly, an urban pious foundation normally consisted of at least one charitable institution, such as a mosque, a religious college, soup kitchen for the poor, and income-generating components such as hammams, public baths, workshops, and others. The revenue generated from the latter, from the income-generating components, usually in the form of rents, was used to secure the charitable functions of the foundation. So why is the Ottoman system of pious foundations so significant for this book? because throughout the early modern period, a vast array of public services, including religious observance, education, providing for the poor, healthcare, construction and maintenance of water systems were taken care of almost exclusively by pious foundations. Do you see this? I see a message that saying a free meeting will end in 10 minutes. I'm saying this to Nina and to Nur.
Yeah, I also saw it. I'm trying to understand it. Okay, I'll check it. Yeah, you can continue.
Okay, okay. So in the book, I show how since the middle of the 15th century, when Sofia became the capital of the province of Rumeli, and most notably during the 16th century, Sofia acquired the institutions, architecture, and infrastructures of an Ottoman city. What the book specifically brings attention to is the fact that the upsurge of building activity and the Ottomanization of the built environment that were experienced in the first century and a half since Sofia's promotion to the status of provincial capital were accompanied by the establishment of a water infrastructure and the introduction of public services. Ottoman Sofia's water supply system was established at the turn of the 16th century, the beginning of a period that witnessed the biggest advances of the Ottomans, both in the construction of water facilities and in the institutionalization of water management. What did Ottoman water supply look like, and how was it organized? So, we're here. So during the expansion of their state in Europe and the Middle East, the Ottomans inherited a complex system of knowledge in the area of water supply, cultivating the technological achievements of their predecessors and the experience and expertise of the diverse populations under their control. Ottoman water supply made its biggest achievements in the 16th century. This was the time when the business of water provisioning acquired its institutional framework, its professional stratification, and reached the peak in its technological complexity. The system that oversaw the building quality and the enforcement of the maintenance standards. Okay, great. Ottoman water facilities was headquartered in the imperial capital with regional administrators in the provinces and specialized personnel in the urban centers. Sometime toward the end of Sultan Süleyman Kanuni's rule, probably in the early 1560s, a directorate of waterworks was established in Istanbul. And so the technical work of building and maintaining water systems was performed by water technicians. Sofia's water supply system was established in 1506 by Yahya Pasha, who had served as Beylerbey or Governor General of Rumeli earlier. The system was part of the charitable components of Yahya Pasha's Pious Foundation, which was actually centered in Üsküp, which is present-day Skopje in North Macedonia. In Sofia and its vicinity, Yahya Pasha's foundation was in possession of various commercial properties, some of which were very significant from an economic standpoint, including a covered market that was arguably the largest one in the Balkans, just to give you an example. This indicates that the foundation played an important role in the making of Ottoman Sofia and in the development of the city's economy. The water infrastructure that Yahya Pasha established in Sofia consisted of a conduit that carried fresh mountain water and a network of fountains dispersed throughout the city and accessible to all. And as one of the charitable components of Yahya Pasha's Vakıf, Sofia's water supply system was the raison d'etre for all the commercial income-generating properties of the foundation in the city. The system was serviced by the population of the village of Boyana, located in the lower fringes of Vituše, close to the spring that the system drew its water from. The peasants received significant tax exemptions in exchange for their work, and this recorded in detail in several tax registers of the second half of the 16th century. The functioning of Sofia's water supply system is further illustrated by petitions that were submitted to the central government in the 18th century. In one case, the water technicians complained that they were wrongfully charged with some of the extraordinary levies that they had been exempt from. And in another case, we learned that the peasants were forced to work for the tax farmer of the village without compensation for a few months, and this made it impossible for them to perform their duties as water technicians. These petitions illustrate a lot of aspects of how Ottoman water supply operated. We learn about the institutional infrastructure that was involved in the functioning of Ottoman water structures. This includes, for example, the Kadı Court, the Law Court, the Grand Vizier, and the Defterhane, which is the early modern Ottoman equivalent of Ministry of Finance. Notably, one of these petitions was actually submitted not by the peasants themselves, but by Sofia's residents who were concerned about the impact of these developments on the city's water supply, which illustrates the extent to which water supply connected urbanites and peasants. And so ultimately in the book, I argue that Yahya Pasha's water supply system exemplifies the technological achievements of the Ottomans, the role of the Vakıf for the continued functioning of public services, and the importance of water facilities in the construction of eco-communities. Maintained throughout the early modern period, the system also emerges as a reflection of Sofia's history, a valuable terrain for the study of urban development and the relationship of the natural and human-made environments of the Sofia plain. The nature of the Ottoman city also deals with a topic that has largely been overlooked by environmental historians: thermal water. My argument is that what was most characteristic of Ottoman Sofia's urban experience was the city's profound relationship with its thermal waters. Of course, this relationship had been evolving over many centuries, since long before the Ottomans conquered Sofia, and it was an expression of the culture of water that dominated life on the Sofia plain. The hydrothermal wealth of the Balkan Peninsula has one of its main concentrations in the Sofia plain, where the abundance of springs has shaped the settlement network. It has predetermined the locations of the main urban node and many of the villages in the vicinity, and this kind of relationship between thermal water and settlement structure actually characterizes a much wider region, extending well beyond the boundaries of the Sofia plain. In the Ottoman era, hot and cold springs made urban space, the natural environment, and Sofia's rural hinterland familiar and identifiable by offering themselves as place names and spatial markers. And here I'm giving you just a few examples of place names from the Sofia region. Yukarı Bana, present-day Gorno Bana, Aşağı Bana, Bana, also known under other names related to the words for thermal spring and bath utilizing spring waters. Sofia's rich hydrothermal toponymy motivated the quintessential Ottoman traveler Evliya Çelebi to talk about the hydrothermal terminology in the Islamic world when he was in the city in the middle of the 17th century. In this country, hot springs are called Bana, in Persia Germab, in Arabia Humma, in Turkestan Ilıca, in Yörükistan Kaplıca, among the Tatar Ilısı, in Kurdistan Çelmik, in Serbian Kasence, in Turkmen Ilığın, in the words of Evliya Çelebi. The intertwined and overlapping networks of health, leisure, and spirituality woven around the thermal springs of the Sofia plain were at the core of the local culture of water. At the very heart of this water culture, which I define as a system of beliefs and rituals centered around the use of the healing and sacred waters of the plain, was the thermal spring that had been designated in the area of Sofia's center for millennia. The area of the thermal spring, Sofia's historic center, was occupied by several baths, laundries, many workshops, and other commercial institutions, as it was also the commercial heart of the city. I've just admitted another participant. The very name of the place, Banabaşa, a construction of mixed Bulgarian and Turkish origin, reflects the symbiosis of the old local traditions with the building practices and bathing rituals brought by the Ottomans, as well as the permeability of ethnic and religious boundaries in the area of the main thermal spring. It was at this busy shared space that people gathered to fulfill their hygienic needs and perform their rituals. In the book, I show how the thermal baths of the Ottoman city as an essential urban institution cultivated a communal spirit that considered the maintenance of public works a shared obligation among the city's population. Furthermore, I argue that being deeply embedded in the daily routine of the urban folk, Sofia's thermal baths served as important anchors for the achievement of a sense of place. And while the impact of thermal water and thermal baths on the place consciousness of Sofia's residents may seem clear and logical given the centrality of the thermal spring and the baths in their daily lives, we can also find many examples of how thermal water dominated foreign travelers' impressions and experiences of Sofia. Confronted with the unremarkable one-story wooden residential architecture, the public baths were what made Sofia a city in the eyes of European travelers. To the foreign visitors, Sofia's public baths were not just an attraction, but a symbol of the city's Ottoman personality. Aside from demonstrating the roles that the Ottoman thermal baths played as pillars of urban culture and important anchors for the achievement of a sense of place, I have also attempted to localize these structures on the map of Sofia's built fabric, despite the limited and often contradictory information that's contained in the primary sources and the secondary literature. So while I'm personally much more interested in the early modern period, as a historian of the Ottoman Balkans, I know that a lot of the present-day stereotypes about the Ottoman period in the history of the Balkans emerged in the 19th century. Or at least many of these stereotypes have their roots in misinterpretations, whether intentional or not, of things that took place in the 19th century. So that's why in The Nature of the Ottoman City, I pay a lot of attention to the 19th century, and I think about the long 19th century in Sofia's history through the lens of disaster. During the long 19th century, Sofia experienced a series of human-made and natural disasters that had an enormous impact on the city's built fabric and underground infrastructures. And by the long 19th century, I mean the period that begins with the political turmoil and banditry of the 1790s, 1820s, and ends in 1912 when post-Ottoman Sofia received its modern water supply system. Bulgarian historiography likes to divide the 19th century into two separate parts. An Ottoman period when urban decay was irresponsibly left to reach its peak, and the Bulgarian period when the city made its first great strides toward the achievement of modernity. Challenging this bipolar narrative, I emphasize the similarity in the predicaments that shaped the Ottoman and Bulgarian policies in the fields of urban planning, underground infrastructures, and natural resource management during the long 19th century. The approach of military front lines around the turn of the 19th century and the internal instability characteristic of that period saw Sofia lose its central position in the Ottoman provincial structure. By the second half of the 1830s, Sofia had descended precipitously from a provincial capital to a peripheral town in a shrinking empire. By 1836, the functions of Rumeli's center of governance were assumed by Manastır, a city that was more strategically located in the new political and military climate. In 1861, Sofia was detached from the province of Rumeli and added to a new province that was established around the small town of border town of Niš. In 1864, Sofia became part of the Danube province. So despite this downgrade of Sofia's status within the Ottoman provincial structure, in the book I show how central and provincial authorities made sure that public architecture emphasized the presence of the empire and its continued concern for the city. The 1850s and 60s saw efforts to improve the state of the city's central commercial district, improvements in public hygiene and sanitation. The 5 main thoroughfares were widened, straightened, and lined with trees. Significantly, what I argue in this book is that even in this difficult period, Sofia's water supply was not abandoned by the authorities. The book shows how the life of Sofia's water supply during the Ottoman half of the long 19th century illustrated developments in the fields of vakuf and water supply on an imperial level. In 1826, most past foundations were placed under the authority of the newly established Ministry of FKAF and became subject to taxation. The supervision of the foundations under the ministry's jurisdiction was delegated to FKAF directors who were supposed to work in cooperation with the district councils. The goal was to curb widespread abuse on the part of past foundation administrators and to, whenever possible, to expropriate past foundation lands and make them available for profitable capitalist circulation. By the 1850s or 60s, Yahya Pasha's vakuf had also been taken under the supervision of the Ministry of FKAF, although in contrast to most other vakufs, it belonged to the category of FKAF Milhaka, vakufs supervised by the state but free to operate with their own finances as they saw fit. Simultaneously with the empire's effort to reassert its authority in the field of vakuf, the reform thrust of the 19th century brought forward a reorganization of the Ottoman water establishment. By the early 19th century, water technicians' swelling numbers and their no longer sufficient incomes opened the way for malpractice and deterioration of the water-related services and the general decline of the institution. As a means to securing a steady income, water technicians reportedly resorted to intentionally damaging water conduits, thereby forcing the populations and the commercial and charitable establishments serviced by those facilities to invest money in their maintenance. In 1836, the Directorate of Water Works was appended to the Ministry of FKAF to ensure stricter control of the water establishment. In the second half of the 19th century, however, the district councils originating from Midhat Pasha's provincial reform were delegated wide prerogatives concerning the management of public services, including water supply, a duty that matched their responsibility to oversee, together with the FKAF directors, the affairs of the past foundations. In this turbulent period for the Ottoman water supply enterprise, Sofia's aging water system was in serious need of maintenance. Given the city's precipitous loss of status within the Ottoman provincial structure, however, the authorities charged with overseeing Sofia's public services and facilities could implement only palliative measures to preserve the functionality of the water supply system. In the book, I shed light on several cases from the 1850s and 60s when the water supply of the infantry and cavalry barracks in Sofia needed urgent maintenance. The project involved Yahya Pasha's vakuf and a number of local, provincial, and central military and civil authorities. It took a lot of time for some concrete actions to be taken. All parties involved were looking for the cheapest options. And in the end, the problem was solved by tapping into a regional economy of natural resource management. The damaged portions of Sofia's water supply system were fixed with wood pipes that were obtained from nearby Samokov, a center of wood industry. And yet, even in these times of political, military, and financial uncertainty, the maintenance of the water supply system was not abandoned. On the contrary, in the book, I show how in 1875, Yahya Pasha's Vakuf prepared a plan for a comprehensive maintenance project aiming to completely renovate Sofia's water supply system. This expensive multi-year project was coordinated with the Sofia District Administrative Council. It received a green light from the Ministry of FKAF and was approved by the Sultan, but eventually, as you can guess, the project would be interrupted by the Russo-Ottoman military conflict that broke out only 2 years later and left some sections of the system and the street network unfinished into the post-war days, ironically contributing to the Bulgarian national discourse of Ottoman Sofia as a mismanaged city. In post-Ottoman Bulgaria, as elsewhere in the Ottoman successor states, in the Balkans, the modernization of urban fabrics and infrastructures was seen as a statement of the superiority of the nation state over its former imperial master. However, as I show in the book, the post-Ottoman authorities found themselves continually unable to come up with solutions superior to the water supply practices of their predecessors. And one good example of the predicaments that the Bulgarian authorities faced comes from 1882, when 3 of the Vituša springs were recaptured, a small reservoir was built to provide pressure, and the water was carried to the city by means of a stone canal followed by metal pipes. You know, the Bulgarian authorities are trying to create a modern water supply system. This system lasted less than half a year, even though the pipes were factory-made imports. The abnormally high pressure caused by the experimental addition of water from other sources damaged the pipes and left the city without water supply for more than a week. The only way to restore regular water supply was to resort once again to the system implemented previously by the Ottomans based on the easily available natural resources of the region. The shipment of 2,000 wood pipes from Samokov was ordered. And these struggles continued until 1912, when Sofia received its first modern water supply system. So to sum this up, both the 19th century Ottoman authorities and their Bulgarian successors were concerned about the state of Sofia's water infrastructure and faced similar financial dilemmas, and their efforts, regardless of their agendas, had similar outcomes. While for the post-Ottoman authorities, water infrastructure did play an important role in the symbolic repossession of the city and the subsequent construction of national space. During the first 3.5 decades of Bulgarian statehood, this infrastructure functioned largely within the bounds of the system established by the Ottomans. And while the struggle for the construction of a modern water supply system illustrates some important continuities between the Ottoman and post-Ottoman periods, the fate of Sofia's thermal baths plays a central role in our understanding of the shift that the end of Ottoman rule brings to the relationship between nature and culture in Sofia. In the book, I argue that the making and imposition of national space in the post-Ottoman period led to the creation of an entirely new place in Sofia's historic center by the beginning of the 1910s. I show how over several decades, Ottoman Banja Baša was transformed into Bulgarian Bath Square. With the establishment of the Bulgarian nation state, I argue space and place would be reconceptualized in a way that prioritized nation over nature. The final pages of the book trace this debate about the making of Bath Square, which was envisioned as modern Sofia's representative center. The efforts of urban planners and architects to create Sofia's image of a capital city, of a modern nation state, as the book shows, converged in the project for the construction of Bath Square, whose key features would be monumentality and representativeness. From the late 1870s until the early 1910s, Sofia's historic center was stripped of its Ottoman-era water facilities. Among the new monumental structures that were built on Bath Square were the central municipal thermal bath and the central market hall. Both were designed in this new national romantic style of architecture. Bat Square, post-Ottoman Soviet's representative center, showcased not the relationship between nature and culture, but the success of the nation state and the steadfast pursuit of modernity. And now I'd like to say a few words about the sources of this book. I use a diverse source base to write the history of an era that has been wiped out from the surface of the modern city. Tax registers, past foundation deeds, law court records help me explore the activities of past foundations and the making of Sofia's water supply. The same kinds of sources also shed light on the construction and functioning of Sofia's thermal baths. Individual petitions say a lot about the mechanisms that were available to secure the continued maintenance of the water supply system. I use travel accounts of the early modern period and the 19th century for various purposes, most notably to illustrate foreign visitors' perceptions of Sofia's built space and the prominence of thermal water and public baths in the image of the city. Evliya book of travels, written not by a foreigner, but by an educated Ottoman who was also a very experienced observer of the Ottoman realms, provides abundant detail on the healing properties of Sofia's thermal waters and the numerous ways in which they were related to local customs and beliefs. The 19th century expands the variety of sources significantly. Marginal notes in church books provide important details about the earthquakes of the 19th century. Very significant in this respect and very detailed are the reports that were published on the pages of the Bulgarian periodic press that functioned in 19th century Istanbul. Protocols prepared by Sofia's district court, Sofia's district council, and sent to the central authorities reveal the complexities and limitations of maintaining Ottoman Sofia's water supply in the 19th century. 19th century geographical works and provincial yearbooks provided a lot of clues about the number and locations of Sofia's thermal baths. The yearbooks of the 1870s were particularly interesting as they include a very long description of the thermal springs and baths in the Sofia plain and how they attracted visitors from distant places in a sort of spa tourism. Documentation produced by the institutions of the Bulgarian nation state revealed the complexities of water supply in the first decades of the post-Ottoman period and the obstacles that prevented the authorities from modernizing the system. Hydrological surveys of the late 19th century helped me further in localizing the Ottoman structures that were still standing in the area of the main thermal spring in the 1890s. The post-Ottoman municipal council's protocols, as well as newspaper publications, also reveal the deliberations around the transformation of Banyabaşı into modern-day Bat Square. So to conclude, I want to elaborate very briefly on some of the broader interventions and contributions that this book makes. The nature of the Ottoman city calls for the demolition of the artificial spatial boundaries that still divide the study of the European, Asian, and African provinces of the Ottoman Empire. Despite all differences, the provinces of the empire were connected by institutions of governance and justice, networks of charity, urbanistic and demographic policies, and systems of natural resource management and food provisioning. While this book does not employ an explicitly comparative lens, studying Sofia's history makes many empire-wide connections and similarities stand out. Throughout the Ottoman period of its history, Sofia was connected with various localities across the Ottoman Empire's European, Asian, and African territories via the workings of a network of pious foundations and the constant transfer of people of governance and letters. The city's Turkish population included people with roots in Western Anatolia, and some of their places of origin were inscribed in the urban toponymy. Sofia resembled Bursa in the extent to which an abundant and highly valued natural resource thermal water had left a strong imprint on the formation of built fabric and urban culture. We saw how Evliachev showed off his knowledge of the different terms for a hot spring when he was in Sofia. Well, he did the same thing one more time in the book of travels, and that was in his description of Bursa. So to conclude, Sofia occupied a key position within the Ottoman political and institutional landscapes, while also functioning as a hub of cultural, economic, and technological exchange. Sofia's importance on both the imperial and regional levels and the dynamism of its historical trajectory make it a good vantage point for a longue-durée study of Ottoman urbanism in its institutional, infrastructural, and environmental context. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you very much. So we had a chance to have a glimpse into your book, which is coming out in a couple of weeks, and I'm very much looking forward to it. And your book covers a long period from the 15th century, 14th century, late 14th century to the 20th century, more than a 500 years of period. And you use a wide range of sources written in Ottoman, Turkish, Bulgarian, and other languages. And you delve into political, social, economic, and cultural dimensions of water. So, so you've done a great job, and I'm sure it will be a big splash in Ottoman studies, your book, also in environmental history, in Southeastern European studies. So personally, I'm very much looking forward to it. And from the audience, so if you have questions or comments on Stefan's book or presentation, so please raise your hand or turn on your microphone. Any questions or any feedback, comments?
In the meantime, should I stop sharing, or because we already seen this flyer, so.
Okay. Any questions?
I do have one, if no one else.
Sure.
Just to warm up a bit. Yeah, sorry, Grigor. It's very quick. Thank you so much, Stefan, for your presentation. I'm very curious about in your sources about the marginal notes in church books. What can we learn about marginal notes on church books about water?
Yeah. So they're a very interesting source, and also kind of surprising to me, when I discovered them, because I'm not familiar with the the literature of 19th century, Bulgarian literature of the 19th century. But it's interesting that people noted certain things that they deemed important on the margins of church books, and the kind of marginal notes that I've used are specifically notes that are related to the earthquakes of the 19th century. Sofia was pretty much devastated by two earthquakes. One of them was in 1818 and the other one in 1858. And so people noted the devastation that was caused by these events on church books. Of course, these texts are very brief, but they say something like, it's the day of Saint George, may it be remembered how the earth shook and how many buildings fell down, something of this sort. And I mean, and they're important sources, because I've basically tried to use all sources that I managed to get my hands on when writing about Ottoman Sofia, because even though Sofia was a provincial capital, it, in terms of when you're writing about its urban history or its water supply, the sources could be a little bit limited. For example, in contrast to other places that had enormous sultanic foundations, Sofia lacked that. So it's more difficult to find like really useful sources when writing Sofia's history of the Ottoman period. And yeah, these they're called pripiskas, something that you just write in the margins. They were actually very useful for my research.
Good, thank you.
Grigor?
Yeah, sorry guys, it took me forever to find the button for the for the raising my hand. I'm very excited, and I wanted to thank Stefan for writing this book because I'm very biased. I will also work on towns occasionally, and I know how much such a book is needed because Sofia is such a prominent place, and really the level of our knowledge is negligible, and I think Stefan's book fills a very important gap. And I had the privilege of reading one chapter, so I can advertise it as a very, very promising read. And I have little doubt that this book will be widely read. And also, I would like to congratulate Stefan for the very different from the standard approach in approaching studying a city. And I have a very selfish question. So all that said, congratulations, very well done, and we're waiting for the book. I have a very selfish question on something that you mentioned periphery in the periphery of your talk. You said that during Suleimanic age was established this water management department, this Su Yocu Nezareti.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Where the documents are, what kind of documents we find there? That seems like a fascinating stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, first of all, Ottoman water supply has a longer story. It didn't start in the 16th century, of course. We have evidence, for examples of the existence of water technicians from Mehmed II's time, and they most likely existed. I mean, definitely existed even prior to that. There was a wide variety of positions within Ottoman water supply. They, they varied according to geography, but they were more or less standardized in the 16th century, which, makes sense given how the Ottoman Empire is developing during this period. Of course, certain regional differences remained, but there was a degree of standardization. And so the Su Nezareti was established in the 1860s. There's the evidence is kind of limited to maybe a couple of sources. I mean, hold on a second.
So I see I got you completely wrong. I thought you said there is something from the 16th century. Okay, so I misunderstood what you said.
No, from what we know, the Department of Waterworks was established in the 1560s, right, the 16th century. There is actually like a very long and detailed study about that by Abdullah Martal, who he specifically studies Ottoman water supply in the 19th century, and he's included sources there, but I just don't remember exactly what kind of sources they were, because I didn't find them in the archives. I just learned about them from his article. But yeah, definitely the sources that he found are from the 1560s. And they talk about the establishment of a department of, waterworks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Actually, I have one question. So you mentioned that Sofia has a very unique place, unique geography, let's say, so between the mountains or close to the mountains, so close to water resources. And this kind of provided an opportunity for, urban reform, sanitation, and a lot of positive things happened. So when water reached Sofia and when the Ottomans built water infrastructures. So my question is, what about inequalities? What are created, or were there any inequalities, any disputes? Did some people have more access to water than others, between Muslims and non-Muslims, or between Europeans, non-Europeans, rich and poor? So do you talk about these things in your book, or were there any kind of inequalities or disputes or any problems with access to technology? What about these issues?
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is a very good question. I mean, first of all, I want to clarify that I don't believe Sofia is excuse me. I don't believe that Sofia is unique. Really, I'm just focusing on the things that are characteristic for Sofia, but they're not necessarily unique. We have similar places even in other parts of the Balkans. Kyustendil, for example, has a similar geography and hydrography. So when it comes to access to water, I can't think of specific sources that talk about differences in how much certain people had access to water and how others didn't. What I found is sources where people are complaining of Sofia's water supply being threatened by certain developments. And the sources mentioned that the ahali, the people went to the Qadis court to complain and to write a petition to the government. Again, we have sources where groups of people, regardless of class, right, came together again to the Qadis court to complain that the bath was, the main thermal bath was in danger of collapsing, that kind of stuff. So that's what I've seen. I've seen actually people from different walks of life working together to preserve Sofia's water supply. But I haven't, come across, specifically thinking about the Ottoman period, any, distinctions in terms of class and access to water, right? I mean, this thing appears in the, the late 19th, early 20th century, but it's not central for my work, right?
Thanks. So any other questions or feedback or comments from the audience? No? No, I think, okay, that's okay. Cosmin?
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stefan, for your presentation, and congratulations for your book. I was just wondering if you have encountered any specificities concerning, okay, we can talk all these things about water regulations and technologies employed in regulations and so on. But I was thinking of the 19th century when you have all these waves of cholera kicking in the Balkan Peninsula, and then water becomes also a kind of enemy against the urban population. So you have all these transformations all over the Balkans where physicians and bacteriologists are brought in to analyze the water supplies and how good are these and so on. So I was just thinking if you take this in consideration. And another question is what I found particularly interesting in Bucharest, for instance. By the end of the 19th century, you have water fountains in the urban centers which are directed towards non-human species. So if you have horses and other non-human species around the city, they will have the infrastructure to drink like good water and like water facilities beyond the human use. So if you manage to look at all these stuff, I'm just asking. Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, thanks for these questions. Actually, so first about cholera and other diseases that were indeed rampant in the 19th century. I haven't found anything in the sources about the Ottoman period. I have found like very general things about the post-Ottoman period. I mean, not specifically in the sources, but more in like secondary literature. And I'm talking about still about, let's say, articles that were published in the, let's say, 1920s, 30s, and that were, glorifying the modernization of Bulgarian water supply and complaining, trying to paint unfavorable picture of the Ottoman period by claiming that, the water supply got clogged, there were diseases and that kind of stuff. But, these are just general comments, nothing specific. And basically the goal of the author is to paint the Ottomans in, with dark colors, to present them in that light. So nothing specific really that I have found. And then this is also interesting about water facilities aimed for non-humans. Actually, the thing is, the Pius Foundation deed of Yahya Pasha says that the water supply and the water fountains that he built were meant for everyone, humans and non-humans. This is what the text mentions, but I haven't found any evidence of like specifically, and we don't have that much archaeological evidence from that period because a lot of it was destroyed. So I don't know if any specific facilities existed for the watering of animals, but something interesting that I saw in some of the sources from the 19th century, it was when the water supply of the military barracks were in disrepair, and the soldiers from the cavalry had nowhere to water their horses, so they started watering them in the public fountains in the city, and that was causing problem because these fountains were meant for people, not for animals, right? So there is this kind of problem that emerges during these years in Sofia, which I guess implies that there weren't any facilities specifically designed for animals, but I'm not sure about that. I haven't found them in the sources.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay. Can I just drop a word here? Normally, most of those fountains that are designed for animal use would be in the Hans. So whenever you have a Han, very often, whenever the conditions allowed, you will have a fountain for the animals because that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Or somewhere in the vicinities of a mosque. But I haven't found anything about that in the sources.
Any other questions or comments from the audience? No. So the recording will be available on the ESEH YouTube webpage, right? In a
Hopefully, yes.
Hopefully. In a few days or weeks or months.
Or month, yeah. We are gathering all together, and then we will launch.
Okay.
Okay.
So the next talk will be organized by Australia, right? Australasia. And do we have a date and any scheduled?
Let me check.
Okay.
Yes, it will be a roundtable discussion also. Yeah, it will be a debate about the state of the art in Australia scholars. Indigenous land management, colonial ecological transformations, climate history, urban environmental change. So several topics that are on the table and that will be discussed. It will be in March 25.
So it will be on March 25, and please follow us on Facebook, on X, Blue Sky, YouTube, so on the web, and we'll be announcing it. And Stefan, thanks again for joining us.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
It was a great pleasure to hear more about your book. And so thanks all of you joining us, and see you next time.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.